Okay, welcome viewers. We have Jim Miller here, and he's the author of Singularity Rising, a book which came out a while ago about the outcome of the singularity, the intelligence explosion. Yes, yeah, you can hold it up later when you're more in focus. But yeah, we're going to be discussing AI takeoff scenarios, and I discussed this previously with Robin Hanson not too long ago, but it's an extremely important topic as it if an AI takeoff scenario does actually happen, which I think it likely will it be hard, fast, or will it be soft or slow or somewhere in between? These things need to be considered if we're going to try and bias the likelihood of achieving a long-term beneficial outcome for humanity and indeed life and sentience in the light cone of the AI. So yeah, yes, it's a really interesting topic. It's great. It's great to have you here again, Jim. So a warm welcome to you once again.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for having me on your program.
Indeed.
So I certainly agree. I think, what's going to happen with AI and potential takeoffs is the most important issue we face. It's either going to destroy us or bring us utopia. I'm like everyone else, I'm uncertain of the timeline. It could happen in the next decade. It could happen within 100 years from now. But it's certainly worth worrying about right now. I mean, this is probably the whole ballgame for our species.
What sorts of outcomes would we expect if if just a default I don't know what a default would look like, a default intelligence explosion, but if we don't do anything about it, if we don't try and bias the likelihood of achieving beneficial outcomes, what are some of the less desirable outcomes of an AI takeover?
Sure. I think if we don't have a powerful AI that's trying to be friendly to us, it's aligned with our values, we'll get what Eliezer Yudkowsky has called a paperclip maximizer, which means we have an AI that has some goal. It's not a goal we consider good or evil. It's just kind of boring, like making paperclips, predicting what will happen with stocks, being good at chess, optimizing itself somehow, figuring out pi, something. And it just grabs all the resources it can get, including the atoms in our body. So I think that's probably the most likely outcome. It's certainly not certain. It's not a 99% outcome. But I think the most likely scenario our species is facing is extinction through a very powerful artificial general intelligence that that sees us as weak rivals and does to us what we've done to, well, a lot of the natural world. We just take the resources for our own benefit.
It's like our ancestors may not have hated the giant sloths, but their meat and their bones and their fur was more useful to us in other ways. In the same way as with AI, it may see us as a potential threat, but may not hate us, may not love us, but would be able to use our atoms for something more useful for its goals.
Yep, absolutely. And like the giant sloths, it would, we might have absolutely no hope against it. So this is why it's really important that we figure out how to align the values of AI before we create a really powerful AI. Right? You can imagine that the giant sloths looking at monkeys slowly evolving, and once they became smart enough, it was hopeless. So we should try to figure out how to create friendly AI before we figure out how to create powerful AI. Unfortunately, that's not quite consistent with the economic incentives. So this is my main concern. I'm an economist, and my worry is that every individual actor trying to develop AI has an incentive to make their AI more and more powerful. And we don't know the threshold at which it will, able to self-improve. And so this is quite damaging. And so the competition that AGI makers are in, that is what could doom us.
Yes, like this competition that we're in, this race to try and get there first, be the first company to create the AI god I mean, it seems like we're racing trying to find that genie and bottle. And actually, a lot of people don't know that they're racing towards, a genie and a bottle. They're just hoping they'll be able to create a whole heap of services which outcompete all the other services in a sense. Really.
Yeah, you don't need to be trying to create a god. You just have to be trying to do something a little bit better. Make your machine learning algorithm a little bit more efficient. If you're Twitter, a little bit better at detecting when something is hate speech. If you're Google, figure out slightly better translation methods. And to do this, you hire people who are really good at math. Maybe the smartest 25-year-olds our species has produced. You say, okay, make this machine learning better, and they're making it better. And it's the weird thing about machine learning is that it can work in a lot of different domains. And at some point, machine learning will get really, I think at least, machine learning will get really good at doing machine learning, at improving machine learning. And then you can have a process that explodes. And I don't know where that will lead.
Yeah, so it's really hard to predict.
Sorry?
It is hard to predict, but
it's very hard.
Yeah, it seems to be like things that we should try. It may be hard, but we should do our best and try and make sense of what the future might look like. And try and focus on things that will likely converge on solving the problem, even though we may not have gotten the prediction exactly right about what the problem will be. In like a detailed view of the problem, if we can solve some of the problems now that might lead to the solving the right problems in the future is certainly important. Yeah. Yes, someone actually wrote in the chat room that the AI must follow the collective will of
there
humanity.
Isn't a collective will of our species. That's not a well-defined concept.
Right. I kind of agree there in the sense that, well, we have a lot of motives and biases underneath the hood of our psychology, that are sort of floating underneath our conscious decisions that are nudging us this way and that. And so the collective will may not be actually all that beneficial in the long term, even today. There are forces at play in human psychology that I think don't work well in the modern world. They may have worked well in the ancestral environment. They may have worked well to help our species survive on the African savannah, but we're not on the African savannah anymore.
Yeah, and ultimately this is a math or engineering problem. We need to translate what we consider friendliness or our values into computer code. And the vast majority of humanity has no concept of how to do this. I mean, we wouldn't look at the collective will of how to specifically design an engine for an airplane. That's just, you want it to not crash, but the actual detail, no, most people have nothing to contribute. It's going to be the same with AGI. We want people really good at math to look at the problem, to look at it from the right way, from the best interest of our species, and to hopefully not make a mistake.
Well, maybe his question was more around how do we find the collective will of humanity, and more what it would be if we were wiser, smarter, and had a lot more time to think about it and were less biased than we actually are.
Well, I just hope that we can get past the hump. If we can just still, if we can exist, we can get AGI, have it work, and then we'll be safe. And then once we have it, we can decide what we want to do with it, as long as we still have that option. So if we could create just a guardian AGI that, look, I have this. Okay, if you're going to do something really dumb, if you're going to, someone's going to release some biological weapon that'll destroy everyone, I'll stop it. But now you tell me what to do. But I think first we should get to the point where we have an AGI that actually cares even a little bit about us, that might care what we want it to do. But just developing that's the hard part.
So, yeah, getting over that hump, it does seem pretty hard. But there's a lot more people worried about that or focusing on solving this than there were before.
Definitely.
I mean, there used to be hardly any people who would take it seriously. I mean, a lot of people used to sort of ridicule the idea by just referring to Terminator movies and cheap Hollywood plot devices and things
Well,
like
I think
that.
actually Eliezer Yudkowsky deserves a lot of credit with, in the Les
Absolutely, yeah.
Brown blog, that he's really promoted this and people mocked him and he didn't care. And, he ended up getting, I mean, like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking's, saying, yeah, this is a real worry. So I think this is a huge victory for Eliezer Yudkowsky and, the Singularity Institute and now the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, that he's gotten very high status people to care about this. I know there are people at Google's DeepMind who are at least worried. This is like, it's not absurd to say, hey, what you guys are doing might destroy the light cone. They're like, well, they don't think they're about to do it, but it's not, you're not like proposing they're going to unleash literal demons on us. So that's a big step.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Has done a lot.
And of course,
in
there
helping
are programs
shape
like
thinking.
yours where, you're telling lots of people what's happening and explaining it.
Yeah. I wouldn't compare myself to the amount that either Eliezer Yudkowsky or others, even people like Nick Bostrom as well. He's been doing this for a long time and written a very influential book, Superintelligence.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah. And there are a lot of other people. We can't mention them all, but they all deserve kudos, I think. But yes, indeed, the thinking has evolved, and there's a lot more people involved in AI safety than there was even 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, there does seem to be a rising tide of the amount of people going into machine learning in all over the world, in India and in China, especially in China. From what I hear, there's a huge amount of people going into machine learning and wanting to learn how to develop AI, but not necessarily on AI safety. Yeah,
I think they're just, the companies are paying huge amounts for people who are good at machine learning, and you find out about that, and of course you want to learn it. I'm actually trying to learn it myself. I'm very beginner level, but yeah, that's a huge indication of the importance, because companies like Google, US military, they're not going to tell us like how good machine learning is. But what they are doing is they're competing with other organizations to get the top machine learners, and that's going to affect the wages. So for me as an economist, the best sign as to what Google and all the other people think about machine learning is the salaries they're willing to pay. And they're apparently really high. And if these stay high, that's going to mean that they're finding things. It's also going to mean they're grabbing the most talented of our species into this project.
Indeed. Eliezer did write an article a while ago called "There is no fire alarm for artificial intelligence."
Yes,
I think it was referring to an alarm that was meant to keep us, I guess, to tell us to get organized, and that there were specific instructions, like there is sort of a fire alarm. What happens when a fire alarm goes off? There is protocol and procedure to get out of the building, and people are quite orderly on, for the most part, in getting out of the building. But what we have is indicators and writings on the wall that are sort of scattershot around our environment, I guess. We hear about larger and larger wages for AI developers. We hear of like unprecedented AI progress and surprising wins in games, like for AlphaGo winning against the grand champions of the board game Go, whereas people estimated that it would likely be achieved in at least 10 or more years, if that, or if ever. Them getting much better at writing and playing more games in more 3D environments, and being able to image recognize and translate and do all sorts of amazing things that were once thought to only exist, thought to be only in the domain of human expertise, where humans had this sort of island of unique style of thinking that AI would never be able to touch. So there is indicators, but there's nothing specific that these indicators are actually telling us to do. Right?
Yeah.
With nobody that,
Yeah, and they're not things that most people accept. It's
Mm,
not like, Genghis Khan is, he's 20 miles away and he's burned that village, so we have to be really worried.
that's
And
right. I
unfortunately,
mean, they're abstract.
the indicators are things that generally are good. So it's reasons, the improvements we're going to get in AGI will mostly make our species better off. So it's hard to panic about them.
Mm.
It's not like with
There are a couple of ones that people panic about, like the deep fakes. I mean, we spoke
oh
about
yeah.
this a little bit earlier before the interview, but
Oh, I
I mean,
think
they're funny and hilarious, but
deepfakes might be a good thing. This is off topic, but
yeah.
it's a counter to privacy, because now if someone like videotapes you doing something embarrassing, you have an easy out. Oh, that wasn't me. That's a fake, right? You're become immune to blackmail. What? Oh, sure, really? I could create videos of me doing that. So in a sense, it gives us effective privacy. If I say something really embarrassing, what? That wasn't me. That was it. You ran a deep fake to embarrass me, and people can't tell. Great. I'll be less nervous about saying something stupid while I'm being recorded on Facebook. So there's some upsides to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, but it does show that like AI is getting better, and it became in a
Yeah.
sense, we may be entering an age where even human behavior can be sort of engineered into, and an AI makes it look so much like a normal human being that everyday life is like a Turing test. We're constantly trying to work out whether the AI that we're interacting with is a genuine human or an identity, if it's sentient or not, or whether it's just
Yeah.
it's not sentient, it's just behaving like it is.
The idea of sentience, we might realize that has no deep meaning. That we
Mm,
might say, yeah, these AIs
wow.
aren't sentient, but I can't tell. So, doesn't,
Mm, mm, mm. But we do seem to find value in our experience. We assume other people who behave like us have this sort of valuable sense of the world around us, this experience, this, the highs, the lows, the novelty.
Yeah.
It's not just, a blind, unsensing algorithm churning information without actually experiencing it. So we seem to have a position that we believe that our experience is worthwhile.
Yeah, but if you go
Yeah.
back in history, I mean, obviously I should say, so slavery is a horrible thing, but certainly past humans had no problem thinking these people are slaves, they have a miserable life, so what? They're not us.
Hmm.
Their experiences are not relevant, their pain isn't relevant. I think we'll likely do the same thing. Something like, Alexa will be talking to us like another human, and it'll be like, well, but it's not. Alexa's experience.
Answer your question.
That's Alexa. Sorry. Sorry. But that, we just won't care. I think that's likely, since we have, it's easy for humans to not care about outgroups that are suffering. I think we'll end up viewing the same way with our AI tools, that will just say, well, it can talk to me like a human, but so what?
Well, I guess I agree, but there is one difference now compared to then, is that we didn't really have a strong not everybody was as educated, and not everybody understood philosophy as much. We weren't as connected, and we were a lot more desperate to survive as well. And these were pretty much the only means of survival, or not the only means of, what can I say? These were means of survival that would elevate our status, and we're status-seeking organisms, and we'd want to have slaves so it makes us look better in the eyes of our neighbors or whatnot. So yeah, there was quite a perverse incentive in a sense, and I'm wondering whether we're past that, whether we've reached a level of philosophical and ethical sophistication where we'll be able to stand back and say, no, we shouldn't do this, and here's why, and we can explain why. We can have rational arguments about it. Whereas in the past, it was very hard for people to find the education and find the literature to actually scaffold a rational argument as to why there should be slavery or why there shouldn't be. And so these days we can do that. I'm not saying everybody does, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah. No, I mean that's you could say there's been moral advancement. I'm not sure about that. I wonder if it's just changing moral fashions. So the past seems barbaric to us because they had different moral values.
Hmm. Well, that's another thing I'm worried about. If there is no moral realism in the universe, if morality, if it isn't real, then if we do set AI to the task of trying to discover what the most valuable ethic is, then it may not find anything and may decide that moral relativity is more real than anything, and take its own position, or take the
Yeah.
position of those who created us at the
Well,
disadvantage of everybody else.
hopefully we'll give it a terminal value to, either help humanity or help sentient life or all life or something.
Mm, mm,
So
mm,
yeah,
mm.
I'm mostly a moral realist, but you can program in a goal to an AI. And if we could get it
Mm.
to, take that goal, that would be fine. In fact, moral
Yeah.
realism could be, I mean, if absolute moralism could be bad, because then we could give it a goal, help humanity. And it's like, no, 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 actually, no, you guys should be exterminated. I have something better to spend my resources on. So that would be awful. If like a sufficiently intelligent
Some
AI would
output.
necessarily kill us.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
would realize the higher moral goal is building a statue to the one true whatever in the universe.
Mm,
I
mm,
think we're
mm.
better off with moral realism being true. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I wonder if we can just try and make progress in this area and find out what if moral realism is true, and follow on and sort of, if it is true and it benefits us, then we should
Yeah.
adjust our relative positions to suit. But if not, then we should continue on in the fantasy that we're the most important things, at least in our light cone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is one of the things about what sort of tasks we ought to be giving the AI, or the artificial general intelligence, if it does bootstrap to super intelligence quickly, like taking off. What sort of projects should we be giving it as the first things in which it tries to focus on?
We should
Um,
I think we should try to reduce to computer code our moral values.
mm,
I mean, whatever our values are. So right now,
mm,
you can't even write a book saying this is what a good human should do. Someone will find loopholes in it. There'll be something. But we should try. If we get better and better AGI, we should say, look, examine us, figure out from our behavior what our better selves would seem to care about. Write that into
yes, better.
computer code. Let us go over the computer code with you. We'll go, we'll have the 10,000 smartest people go over the code. And then as you get more powerful, this will be what will guide you.
Mm,
So I hope that's, what we can do is use machine learning to figure out what we would like our machine, how we would like our superior machine to treat us when it becomes
mm, mm,
superior to
mm,
us.
mm. That sounds reasonable to me, and I agree. We should
Of
be
course, I have no
focused.
idea how to translate that into machine learning. That's just words, and that won't do anything in terms of implementing computer code.
Mm. Can we can we take this at least some distance before we actually develop artificial super intelligence? Do you think it's a goal which is obtainable
Yeah,
by merely unaugmented humans?
I really don't know. I mean, it depends on how long there's going to be where it's like, it's really useful in figuring our values to where it's all powerful. And I guess you can look at analogies with chess, right? There was a long time in which computers were better at most people than chess, but not better at everybody. And that's kind of a sign, yeah, maybe it'll be slow. But then with AlphaGo Zero, it started out with, zero knowledge of chess, and it quickly became better than anyone. So chess, the analogy to chess, it shows it can go both ways. And I have no idea. Our species might end up depending on that. How long of a lead time do we have?
Mm, mm.
And
Like,
days or decades?
right. We just don't know, do we?
Yeah.
I guess we better prepare for a hard takeoff,
Well,
because it does seem as though it's reasonably
actually, there's an
feasible.
argument that we should prepare for a medium takeoff, because you could say, look, if it's a hard takeoff, it's hopeless. We're
Right.
doomed. We're like the
Okay.
dinosaurs 3 years before that meteor is going to crash into it. So we should prepare for the situations in which we can make a marginal difference. So if it's
Yes.
50 years, we're going to survive this. If it's 5, maybe not. Maybe 5 years is the right time to prepare for, because if it's less than that, very little hope. More than that, we're going to be able to handle it. So we should focus our efforts on marginally improving. Like normally we wouldn't have survived if it was only 5 years, but now with preparation we can. I don't know, as an economist, that's where my mind goes to. Don't focus on the hopeless situations. You focus on where you can have the biggest marginal impact.
Are you sure that it's hopeless to try and nudge the likelihood of a beneficial intelligence explosion that comes from a fast takeoff? That is, we should define a fast takeoff as meaning like minutes to days to weeks, not months to years.
I think so, just because we don't know which direction it will go. You're building a very complex device. You're probably going to have mistakes in it. I mean, my understanding is most computer projects have errors in them. There'll probably be something goes wrong. It'll probably be hard to predict what it's going to do. Now, certainly, if we've already figured out what it means for an AI to be friendly, and we have that in computer code, that a fast takeoff would be fine. But if we haven't figured that out yet, and then we get a fast takeoff, then it's hopeless. So I would say the reason when we really need the slower takeoff, if we don't have friendliness down yet in terms of mathematical code, and we need the AGI to bootstrap us into creating, an AGI that's aligned with our values. So that approach can't work if we have 5 minutes. It can definitely work if we have 50 years. Can it work if we have 1 year? I don't know. So that's, in terms of, we don't know what it means for an AI to be aligned with our values. That's the situation which I'm at least referring to in terms of a fast takeoff being hopeless for us.
Right. If it does end up looking like it will be a fast takeoff and we don't really have the time to sort of guarantee that it'll be a slow one or a medium one, perhaps it is wise to try and get AI to discover value and to, look for the reality in value or in moral realism, ethical realism.
We need the presidents of the United States, Russia, and China to agree this is a problem and to say, stop all work on AGI now. If you don't, we will kill you. And we're going to inspect everyone. We need 3 people. I don't know if we get it, but that's what we would need.
Right. Yeah, but the likelihood of actually achieving that form of coordination needs to be sort of thought about as well. Ideally, we'd have all the nations sort of cooperate and agree that it's such a powerful technology looming on the horizon.
It's hopeless. You can't. There's no way. I think that's just that's not a reasonable goal. I think just the nations that could enforce their will on the other nations, and that's a much smaller subset.
Okay. Do you think? Yeah, but at the moment they're not getting along.
Sorry.
At the moment they don't seem to be getting along very well.
Nah, United States and Russia coordinated against ISIS. We're doing okay with China right now. China's not invading Taiwan. We're probably going to work out a trade deal with them, and we don't face any serious, external threats. So we could be doing a lot worse. They can only talk to each other.
Well, yeah.
It's a last ditch test. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but that is an option.
Sure.
At some point in the future, if things are getting really bad, we're like, gee, we're going to get powerful AGI. We have no idea what friendliness means in terms of computer code. Let's just stop it. And the only way to stop it is to get people to use force to stop it.
Well, okay, so that could backfire. I mean,
definitely,
it could backfire in a way that, like, if people think that they're getting on towards AI, or people report that they are, they could use that as a smokescreen to actually to hide the fact that what they're really looking for is just world dominance, and AI may not just be around the corner. So how would we know for sure that we were getting close to a stage where a hard takeoff or a medium takeoff was sort of imminent?
Well, that's a great question. My best guess is we get a hard takeoff when you can take the humans out of the loop in terms of improving machine learning or improving AGI. So if it looks like let's say there's 20 things you have to do that, with Google to improve their machine learning. There's 20-step process, and 18 of them are automated, and they go really quickly. So, the problem is the humans in the other 2 steps. And it's like, hey, wait, we just got 19. Oh, there's only one more thing that hasn't been automated yet. Then you could probably say, yes, once this is automated, it's just going to explode. So my guess is it'll be something like that, where you can tell what are the limitations. Why are we not going really, really quickly? And because people can't go really, really quickly. So, but
I went to an AGI conference a while ago, and I've been thinking about these sorts of things and talking to people about them in a sort of roundabout way in some of the interviews I did earlier. But what really hit home was the idea that there are people working on the problem of what understanding is and focusing on how to solve that. Yeah. So what is understanding? I mean, what does it mean, not just for humans to understand, but it's an epistemological concept. What is understanding? If that is actually solved in terms of any AI, like, federated parts of AI coming together and working together to achieve that, or whether it's just, one big sort of algorithm that's tightly coupled, then yes, that could be the last problem that needs to be solved. I mean, there's been a lot of focus in epistemology on what knowledge is, but and how to implement sort of algorithms in AI. But what all of them take for granted is what is the thinkers are applying their understanding to generate knowledge. The many thinkers in an epistemic community all coming together to make sense of something and generate knowledge. The understanding is the thing that's happening behind the scenes that we don't quite understand. And with the algorithms that we're designing, it's the human beings with their understanding that are designing the algorithms which are going into the computers. But once we understand the architecture, the what makes understanding tick in a human brain or conceptually anywhere, doesn't have to be a human form of understanding. Once that can happen in a computer, at the risk of inspiring all these geniuses out there to go start programming understanding, I think that could be like a very strong hint. Once we have real understanding language, not just natural language, quote unquote understanding, but actual understanding.
I wonder though if you need that. I mean, that with machine learning, you don't need to understand things. You just have to find patterns. And you don't even have to, the patterns could be so complex that no human brain could understand them because there's, 1,000 variables involved. And so there just has to be patterns. I mean, in some ways, understanding is just prediction.
Yep.
And
so compression, you could say.
Early through statistical analysis, through Bayesian analysis. And that's probably what our brains are doing. We're making predictions and smarter people getting more right.
Well, remember, we're probably, as humans, not the ideal agents for understanding. I mean, we have some of it, arguably.
We're good at understanding in our ancestral environment.
We're
good at reacting if we think there's a tiger over there that might attack us. Our brains can handle that problem quite well.
With training, we can recognize when we're confused. We can sort of have a sense of where the edges of our competence are, and the types of things that we need to do in order to expand those edges or predict exactly where they are, and then grow those edges outwards. And so, our maybe intersect with other clumps of understanding, or the clumpiness of understanding, and bridge them together in certain ways. But it's a really interesting topic. I mean, I want to interview more people on this very specific topic of what understanding is and what it would mean to actually design one. But I don't know what it would look like from the outside, peering in, whether we would be able to make a meaningful sense of whether an AI had understanding or not. I just don't know. The Turing test probably isn't enough, really. There'd need to be some pretty strict requirements. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Turing test isn't good enough, especially when if you can tell if it's a computer or not by whether it makes mistakes.
Indeed. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not useful. Oh, you must understand because you made a mistake in grammar. If you hadn't made a mistake in grammar, well, then I would know you're a mere machine and couldn't have understood what you were talking about. That doesn't quite seem right.
Someone brought up in the chat room that it's not a foregone conclusion that we'll actually create an AI that takes off. Yes, that's true. I just want to make sure that people realize that we're only talking about the cases where it will. People have different confidences as to whether it's likely we'll achieve an AI takeoff. All sorts of things might stop us from doing it, like, like climate change, causing a lot of second order effects which destabilize the society and brings down the internet and all sorts of
a more
reasons.
optimistic version is that this machine learning boom, it peters out. They figure out a lot of great stuff, but then they can't go anymore. But meanwhile, we're able to upgrade humans, that we figure out ways of making smarter people, these drugs, this kind of training, this kind of brain interface. And we become super intelligences and we have our own values, and that might not go well, but it's more likely to.
Yeah, David Pierce wrote about that in his biointelligence explosion thing, which I thought put it out there as a pretty cool guy. So yeah, that's something like a scenario worth considering for sure. But I'm on the side that I think that it's reasonably likely to happen as long as we don't destroy ourselves or sort of create a moratorium on building AI before we actually achieve this sort of thing.
I agree, because you'd have to point to a milestone that you think an AI won't be able to do this. What is something that even like a group of 50 people could do that an AI won't be able to do? And it's hard to think of those. It's hard to think of something that'll be confident. No, 50 years from now, I think, an AI couldn't do it, given that it's something that right now humans can do. Yeah. Certainly they'll be able to write as well as we are, make movies, music. It's hard to think of it, pretty much anything. And that means, it'll at least get to our level of intelligence, and then you just keep increasing the speed, and it's basically a super intelligence.
Hoppy Eng, if I pronounced the name correctly in the chat room, said maybe we can create a fake AI winter.
Yeah,
that would be a deep fake AI winter.
Fooling Google is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Fooling the Chinese Communist Party that has lots of spies in Google right now is also going to be a challenge.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny. That's
yeah, no. It would be, but yeah, that's.
Well, okay. Someone raised the question of a hard takeoff via a bottom-up sort of emergent approach, or actually just said bottom-up or top-down AI. I'm not sure what he means by bottom-up or top-down.
You could imagine something sort of bottom-up, where we come up with this algorithm that is really smart, but it requires so much computing power that everyone has to run it. You can imagine it's like, look, we got this great thing. It can cure cancer, but we need more computing power. So everyone, please download this app, and we're going to turn off a whole bunch of things, whatever, all the porn sites have to go dark for a few days so we can run this app. And it's sort of everyone's collective devices. Another neat way we can maybe get bottom up is through the AI value approach, where perhaps there'll be some app where you'll help the AI learn your values. You'll answer questions, and millions of people could participate, where the AI is quizzing us. What would you do in this situation? It's giving us pictures. Which do you like? And maybe that's how it learns our values, where literally millions of people contribute. Because I imagine Google is kind of doing it with our email. There must be training.
Yeah, and the way that we search and things, for sure.
Yeah, like Gmail gives you a choice of which way to respond, you can automatically give a certain answer. They must be, training that on what we're actually doing. So if maybe we could do this explicitly, and that could be sort of a bottom up, where our behavior essentially aligns AI's values with ours.
That's true.
Kind of a nice storybook ending, though, to our play. Right. So it won't happen.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm worried about in such a scenario is the nature of the type of technology, that it's the design of the software which is being used to monitor our behavior. how that will actually influence our behavior,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah, like Twitter.
even the social systems at the time, the social configurations at the time where all this data is being harvested, how that's influencing the way that we behave. And is this sort of like a sort of behavior lock-in scenario, whereas AI sort of like takes this reading over a period of time when certain software architectures and certain social configurations are in place? Will that sort of determine the trajectory of the future in a very limiting way?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of optimistic. This probably in part comes from my being basically a pro-capitalist guy. I think there certainly will be bad things, but mostly you'll make more money as a company if you figure out ways of making people better off.
Mm,
And so, if you can figure out, hey, how can I change your behavior so you're not going to be addicted to opiates, or so you're more productive at work, or you care more about your children. And so while there could be some self-destructive things, like certainly like Twitter, where you're interacting with people anonymously, it's easier to be mean. I guess is that'll all probably mostly work out, because that's what you'll pay the most money for, is behavioral changing things that changes your behavior in a way you want. And most people, I think, if they could control how they change their behavior, would do it in a way that was socially unbeneficial. Certainly with your children, you would.
mm,
Right? If you're saying, well, this technology will affect how my child thinks, you'll want your child to be happier and nicer and, study harder and eat vegetables and never take drugs.
yeah. I
I think
guess,
it
like,
probably will
in
work
some
out.
respects, what we've seen with social networks is like, this may sound pretty pessimistic, but it seems as though the social network designers have a vested interest in keeping people on the social networks,
Definitely. But they're
right?
competing with each other. So you
Yeah.
could imagine an alternate Facebook of, Facebook where everyone's nice to each other. And if people
Mm.
wanted that, that would happen.
Mm. But
So
people
you've got to,
don't only buy into what they want; they buy into what they're motivated to get. Now,
definitely.
this could be through addiction. Now, it could be that, like, the winning social networks are the ones which are better at getting people addicted, and so replacing the addiction to Facebook to whatever the I don't know, spiritual book 3000, maybe that'll be the ultimate addiction in the future, and not because it's better for us, it's just because it's more addictive.
Yeah, but then there's also the service of this will cure you of all addictions.
Mm,
Or people will be advising you, don't watch this, don't participate. I mean, technology is going to probably make it easier to shut out technologies you don't like.
okay, well, I
So I
hope
mean,
so.
it could go badly, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I think it'll probably go well. I mean,
Well, I hope so. Yeah, yeah. Look, I'm
that
not
part.
overly pessimistic, but I do see that people do spend a lot of time on social networks, and they do try, and often feel people don't feel very good about it.
Yeah, but the
People have,
alternative was television. And I
yeah,
don't doesn't seem obvious to me that Facebook and Twitter is worse than watching television. I mean, people sitting home staring at television is, I don't know. That's probably, that's not like Facebook's drawing in people from working in soup kitchens and reading the classics.
mm, mm,
They were watching reruns of Gilligan's Island.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So if there were a social network that was, I guess, more conducive to human flourishing and happiness, do you think it would, by nature, all of a sudden take over, or do you think it
Well,
would need some help? I
no,
mean,
I think that it has to make the individuals better off. So just because it promotes, say, that you can imagine the benefit of all mankind. No, I don't think markets are pushing you for that. It's pushing it to make individuals better off as how they perceive it. I think
sure.
that will probably result in more human flourishing.
Hmm.
Um, just because people want to be happier, they want to be healthier.
Mm,
So mostly if you let people change their emotional state, they would change it in a way that most of us would consider beneficial.
mm, mm.
That's
Well,
just,
somebody mentioned in the comments here about AI not being smarter than a 4-year-old. but I thought it would be worth trying to define the ways in which AI is far more intelligent than humans in
Yeah, well,
certain ways and ways that it's not,
yeah,
right?
so
Yeah.
yeah,
So
there are
AI
many.
can obviously do like calculations and sort, like it can sort and search through massive amounts of data far
Yeah,
better than humans can,
yeah.
but maybe not recognize, emotion as well as humans can, or look after children as well as humans can, or do specific jobs as well as human can at this point in time.
Yeah,
But
I bet the emotional one will change really quickly because we're probably giving away our emotions on our facial expressions, and we just don't quite know it yet.
you're
And there
right,
are people who are really good at reading others' emotions, so they're probably
micro
doing that through
expressions.
sight. So once we've trained an AI, it'll probably know your emotional state better than you do.
Mm, hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, but
I've
whether
actually
it's
one embarrassing thing to deal with is my guess is we're also giving away whether we find someone sexually attractive on our face, but we, in many circumstances you want to hide it. But what would happen if suddenly like people in high school could tell if their teacher is sexually attracted to them? There's a
oh,
lot of situations in which you are, and you should hide, and you should hide it, right? Because it's nothing will happen. But that we might not be able to hide anymore who we're attracted to, and that
mm,
person with the simple app could figure it out, and that could prove to be awkward for many people, I imagine, in many situations. So we
yeah.
might that's one way we might lose privacy, not by it spying on us, but just by we try to like keep a stone face, but there's probably so much going on, so that
Mm.
but so that could be an interesting transition when we can't hide our emotions from people around us. Maybe we'll go around wearing masks. I don't know. It'll be so awkward.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we'll just be in that. Well, like in the future, we'll be full of burqas. Everybody will be wearing
Yeah.
them.
Oh
Everybody
God,
will
that's right. That might be the only way to keep social peace. Oh, that's a really funny answer. Yes, that's very plausible. And then, of course, we take it as proof that this is the right religious that God, gave us
of
evidence.
course.
He foresaw this. That's brilliant. That's a great comment. Yeah.
But the men will have to wear them too.
Yes, yes, definitely. The burqa future. Otherwise, men go out with their wives like, wait, y'all, you're all looking at my wife. No, I can't handle this. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, I mean, like it could be, I mean, it's not just about sexual attraction. It's like about violent thoughts and
Yeah,
like Machiavellian thoughts. Imagine, you could instantly know whether someone was sort of plotting to sort of, disgrace you in some way, and you could sort of circumvent that just by reading people. In the sense you have this sort of naturalized telepathy,
yeah,
I guess, in a sense, far more than we have now with machines, but having AI that was so good at predicting people's behavior via just giveaways in their micro expressions and
yeah,
their history and their social network they were in and all sorts of other things, such that they'd be able to really make predictive sort of analysis and inform the interested stakeholders in this predictive analysis. And that could be just about everybody.
yeah,
Yeah, it could be really nasty. What do your parents really think of you? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What do your children really think about you? What does your neighbors want you to do? Yes. Yeah.
I know
Mm.
when I'm teaching, I can tell when my students are really bored because they keep looking at the clock. And when all of them do it, I feel like I get mad, but I'm like, wait, but I should take this as a sign that I've done something wrong in my teaching. But
Hmm.
still, it's emotionally unsettling when all of my students keep looking at the clock. I'm like, what? But I'm trying to be interesting. Why haven't I succeeded? And you get those
Mm.
signals all the time. You're talking to someone, you're like, oh, they're bored with me.
Right. It's interesting though. What kinds of this is an example of a type of like intelligence, an aspect of intelligence, being able to predict human emotion or predict human behavior, or even intention. That that we're quite good at. We're quite good at like recognizing motivation in other people and understanding group dynamics within small groups of humans and things like that. In a
Well,
sense,
maybe.
in a way that's beneficial for us and our sort of local clans or whatnot, our families.
I don't know
In
about
what
that. You have to ask compared to what, right?
yeah, Or
And you
compared
certainly
to
make
the
a lot of
state of the art in evolution.
yeah. See, the problem is there's sort of an evolutionary arms race where, yeah, there's
Mm,
certainly you're rewarded for understanding other people's emotions, but also from being able to fake your emotions.
mm,
So, that's why they're actors and why some people are good at acting and some aren't. So I'm not sure. I don't know if that's true that we're good at judging other people. Now, that might be pride as a social scientist to say, wait a minute, I've studied all these tools to figure out what people are doing, and how could you claim an ordinary person could do that? They don't know how, never heard of utility functions. How is that possible to know what other people are doing?
Yeah,
But
well, that's right. I mean, people don't frame it in that way, but
yeah,
people have it like this intuition thing. It's there's sort of very shortcuts to generally okay, acceptable solutions to, I guess, difficult problems.
yeah.
Yeah, like wicked problems in a sense. But AI is getting better and better at these. What other kinds of intelligence, once that AI is currently not all that good at,
I guess visual
may
recognition.
AI creep up on in the near future or the medium term future that will give us a signal that, well, yeah, this a hard takeoff or soft takeoff or whatever takeoff is nigh.
Yeah, I think vision, because that probably a lot of our brain is devoted to that, to being able to quickly recognize cat, dog, wife, child. So when an AI could do that, that's and then of course on movement too, and obviously because we're our brains are adopted to be living in an ancestral environment. We're good at throwing things and dodging. So
Hmm.
when robots are as agile as we are and can visually recognize objects as well as we can.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we see the Boston Dynamics robots
Yeah,
struggling to keep on their feet, but they seem to be creeping up, right? They're getting better.
definitely.
There's one that can do somersaults now.
When they could win a gold medal in the Olympics in gymnastics, if they were allowed to compete, then
Hmm.
that'd be a major milestone.
Yeah, like when these robots are getting like much better than humans at like physical contact games like football or
Yeah,
table tennis or
yeah, no,
that.
definitely. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe team sport would be better. Maybe not table tennis, but maybe something like basketball, where if you had, if my team got rid of one human and put in the robot, then we would
Mm.
easily win.
Right.
That
Yeah.
might be that might be a good challenge. Would one robot really help a professional basketball team? And it
Yeah.
had to follow the same rules, other than
Right.
the human part.
And then you get a challenge of a whole basketball team of AIs being able to
Yeah.
like communicate with each other at the speed of basically network bandwidth.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah. They'd be able to
Although
coordinate
we don't
in
have
very
to
fast.
make them talk. We would say you have to communicate using voice,
Mm, mm.
because then we
Or
could tell.
expressions, facial expressions, or
Yeah, yeah.
robot visual expressions.
They'd be
Still,
they'd be limited to the sensory data that we have if we want to test their thinking abilities.
yeah. Okay. So, would they be allowed to have screens in their faces or on the backs of their heads as well? Like, just depicting symbols or things like that? Would they have to be humanoid?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I guess some ways you want to optimize for what fans would find interesting, but as a test, I'm not sure. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to give them things that we couldn't do. If you're testing their thinking abilities,
Hmm. Hmm.
then
Hmm.
you might even want to limit their strength and speed to what a typical basketball player would have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's boring. I mean, you could make a football robot that was just a truck that had a motor, and well, this isn't really very smart that it can win at football because nothing could stop it. So you might want to have it. You might want to limit it as much as possible to, having the same parameters as humans have to play with in
Hmm.
terms of strength and voice and all that, and hearing.
Well, let's talk about like competitive scenarios where there's more than one interested agency trying to outcompete each other, like race conditions in AI
That
development and how to
that is
avoid the
really
yeah.
really scary, because imagine your Google DeepMind and you're thinking, you know what? If we make this AI a little better, there's a chance it's going to destroy the universe. But if the universe is that fragile, if making this AI a little bit better is going to do that, we're dead anyway, because the Chinese software company is going to be where we are in a couple of months. So a company could quite rationally say, we really shouldn't worry too much that the next step is going to destroy everything, because if we don't take the next step, the other guy's going to. But when everyone thinks that way, you take the next step and you take the next step until, you know, things are, you're doomed. So it's a really bad situation. It's a very bad competitive equilibrium, where everyone rationally says, if the world is this fragile to improvements in AI, the world is doomed. So we shouldn't worry about that scenario. We should plan our actions assuming that the world is much safer. But if it's not, we're quite dead. But in terms of coordinating, if you know the world, if world leaders do become convinced that AGI is a big threat, the one tool they have to stop AGI development or regulate it is hardware. That you need a lot of computing hardware to run these machine learning programs, and like Amazon, they control a huge amount of it. So that's like the plutonium for regulating atomic bombs, right? It's really hard to get the fissionable material. So to stop people from developing atomic bombs, you focus on making it hard to get that material. We could do the same with computer chips. And you could imagine a future regulatory regime would say, you have to comply with these safety standards, you have to allow inspections, and if you don't, you're not allowed to get computer chips. And developing your own computer chip factory is probably really, really difficult, especially if you're under sanctions from the rest of the world. So there's this one centralized component. There's massive economies of scale. That means bigger is better for developing computer chips. And so that's really the tool I think we should use if we start seriously regulating research in AI.
Right. I guess that there's one thing that did come up, and I agree that could be a great strategy, but I'd say it need to be accompanied by other strategies, of course, right? But assuming that hardware is the bottleneck, let's just assume that right now, that hardware is the bottleneck, then it's Anders Sandberg and Carl Schulman wrote about this a while ago, and said that, well, if hardware really is the bottleneck, then we can pretty much expect a softer takeoff that is limited to the progress of Moore's law. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'd say that, you know, if there is a will, Moore's law could go a lot faster than what it would naturally.
I think I'm making a slightly different point. So that's certainly true if hardware is the bottleneck to, you know, if everyone's going as fast as they can. But you can imagine a scenario where hardware is not the bottleneck for our whole species, it's software, but we still can deprive you of the hardware and make it an artificial bottleneck. So, I mean, electricity is almost certainly not a bottleneck, but we could say, look, your country, we're going to bomb your electrical generating facilities. We could turn it into an artificial bottleneck. So even if hardware is not really the bottleneck, it's software in terms of the resources of our entire species, we could say to a rogue actor, haha, even though you could normally have enough hardware to create your AGI, we're not going to let you get this hardware. So that's sort of more what I had in mind about creating an artificial bottleneck if it's not a real bottleneck with hardware. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. How would you stop people from networking hardware? Even if they don't have local clusters of hardware that are enough to run AI, or, you know.
It depends who you're stopping. I'm assuming it would be easy within the countries that agreed. There's a country that hasn't agreed. You could simply cut off internet connections, or you could only allow internet to go through where you're confident that, you know, they're not using it in a way you don't want them to. So I imagine it wouldn't be all that difficult. You know, you certainly don't allow any of your companies. Intel can't sell them anything. And if, you know, I don't know how you make computer chips, but I imagine there's a lot of American companies that make things that go into computer chips. You say, yeah, you can't sell that stuff to this country either. You know, and you don't allow internet connections. You don't allow wires that can transmit a lot of information. And you might need programs. That probably happens already. I mean, with like all the cloud services, they must be monitoring some things for, you know, checking to see if fraud. And
I guess they could, but like there's certain forms of encryption that can't be monitored. I mean, they're just unbreakable.
Encrypted.
Sorry?
I don't know enough about encryption, but could you, if that's a concern, you'll
Quantum
say
encryption.
run on the cloud service that's encrypted. I don't know. I don't know if you can. I'm sure that you probably do a little bit, but it must slow you down a lot.
Yeah.
Could you run it? Or the other way is just to say, no one has a right to use cloud services unless they get a certificate. So it's sort of you've got to prove that you're not doing something bad in order to get access to computing power.
Yeah. Assuming people don't have clusters of computers that aren't actually attached to the cloud or put up there as being part of the cloud.
Yeah.
But the idea that people can read traffic is similar to the man in the middle problem in security, where you have, idealistically for the man in the middle, it's clear text being sent across the internet, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be weakly encrypted information being sent across, and you can intercept that. And, you can sort of decrypt it, in a fast enough way. And then, you have hashed information. Now, certain keywords out there that have been hashed, like passwords or whatnot, there's rainbow tables out there where there's sort of, exact matches to hash codes to existing words in dictionaries and combinations of those. So, yeah, there's so many ways that things can get encrypted. Decrypted and sort of it's quite an art. But there is certain types of encryption out there that seems to be unbreakable, even by quantum theoretical quantum computers in the future.
But you don't have to allow that anything that's encrypted to be on the cloud services, and you could just restrict who gets to use too much computing power. You have to have a license.
I guess, it could. It's a scenario worth thinking about. I just find it really difficult to wonder how you'd get all the right governments to agree to such a thing. They'd have to open up to each other in such a profoundly different way than they have in the past.
I don't know.
Have secrets.
I don't know if it'd be that hard. They're probably already spying on each other with this. I imagine, the Chinese government knows what Google's doing, and we know whatever Chinese companies involved in machine learning are doing. So I'm not sure if it'd be that open. And think about it from the point of view of China, which is really regulating their internet, right? They're very opposed to the free spread of information. And they're already kind of setting up a system that would make it really easy, if imposed here, to make sure people aren't doing things with computing that we didn't want. So most world governments are already into restricting computers quite a bit. Or a lot are. So you might, wouldn't want to have to do that, but if it's the only way our species is going to survive, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, you're right. But how will people know? I mean, people are always worried about what other people are thinking about them, and I think that goes into the sort of the fear of this 1984 or Big Brother scenario where everybody's being watched.
Yeah.
In a sense, by this huge sort of looming giants looking down at them. It might grate against people's intuitions on how to actually survive in the far future, not even the far future. So I'm just worried that if that is the only solution, how people will be convinced to adopt it.
Well, I think a more likely short-term threat is actually bioterrorism. And that's going to be much harder to regulate. So it wouldn't surprise me if the solution to bioterrorism is we just monitor everybody. Right? I mean, we might need to do that if technology makes it easier for a small group of people to kill a lot of people. We might kind of need universal monitoring. We might adopt that anyway. The spread of devices. I won't say my device's name again. But there's a camera pointed right at me from Amazon right now, and it's pretty much always when I'm at my desk, and I really don't care. Some people do, but most of us, we're going to find it more convenient to always have cameras pointed at us, and then microphones pointed at us to answer, just to do what we want.
Yes, some people don't care as much as others, but it's hard to really know how much other people really do care. I was having a discussion about this with a friend. And he was really worried about this sort of thing, and was absolutely really concerned. Was always listening to people speak out about breaches of privacy and all that. It seems as though it's such a big sort of factor in his way in his worldview, should I say?
But if you go back to our ancestral environment, right, we lived in small tribes. There was no privacy. Our brains are well adapted to a situation in which we have no privacy. We're living in a cave with 15 other people. We've lived them with our whole lives. So that's not something that I think our brains need. Its privacy is a weird adaptation, you know, given that we've gotten rich, so we can afford to have some privacy.
Yeah,
so
I guess so.
I think
Yeah.
we could easily handle not having privacy. It'd be awkward at first, but you know, then it's not.
Well, there was probably arguments for privacy between tribes of
Yeah,
people.
definitely, but not.
Ancestral environment, yeah.
Yeah. There's also advantages. I mean, you know, I'm more afraid of being falsely accused of a crime than I am of something bad happening because of lack of privacy. And, you know, having cameras pointed at me is, well, that'll be good evidence. If someone says, you killed him. No, I was at my computer. Look, ask my devices. They are all watching me.
A deepfake Jim Miller running around,
Yeah.
like massacring people at university. That wouldn't go down well for your career, would it?
Yeah, no. So there are advantages. I think people are far more worried about crime or being falsely accused of crime than they are about privacy. Most people, not everyone, of course, but most of us. Or you know, I mean, I'm getting to the age where I could have a heart attack. I really kind of want cameras always on. I trade my privacy for, you know, if I have a heart attack and I'm alone, you know, ambulances are called right away. I think most people, the older you get, the more you're like, yeah, that's definitely worth it. You know, anyone who has kids would quite happily pay for some company to watch them with cameras all the time. And if, you know, they're about to do something dumb, something happens.
Okay. One of the things we brought up earlier before we did the interview was cryonics. And that's a bit of a strange thing. But, you know, if people did want to survive the intelligence explosion or this hard takeoff or soft takeoff scenario, maybe it's better to be on ice.
Yeah, no, I am a proud member of Alcor for cryonics. And definitely this is like the big practical implication of if you believe in this stuff. If you think, yeah, you know, next 50, 100 years, there's likely going to be some kind of intelligence explosion, and then we'll cure aging. If things go well, we can cure aging and live forever. So you don't want to die, right? Imagine, you know, you die 10 years before we've cured aging, and you could have lived for 1,000,000 years in a fantastic future. You don't want to take that chance. And cryonics is a way of, you know, making it more likely you make it to a good future. Also, you know, the main cost of cryonics is, well, the cost, the financial cost. But probably if there's a hard takeoff, if there's an intelligence explosion, a singularity, you know, money's not going to be all that important. So having a bit less money for your retirement, if you're not going to retire for quite a long time, it's not that big a deal, because probably money won't be as valuable to you. So all this stuff makes cryonics a much better bet. You know, in the event that things go badly, you'll die while being, you know, cryopreserved. So will everyone else. But you know, you know, you're not made worse off. So definitely I would urge people watching this who think, yeah, there could be an intelligence explosion, sign up for cryonics.
Would you argue for going into stasis before you would naturally die, so as to survive a war or survive, you know, social upheaval?
In the United States, that's illegal. The big time that comes up is when someone has a brain wasting disease. And I would definitely do it. People do what's called cryocide, where they refuse food and water and they basically legally kill themselves and then they're preserved. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, cryonics doesn't work if our civilization collapses. So I wouldn't get myself frozen, you know, and that's not guaranteed to work. So if you're healthy, you know, and you had a legal option of preserving yourself, I wouldn't do it unless maybe you were, you know, in constant pain. You had a life where you were literally, you'd rather be sleeping until there was a possible cure. And I can't speak for those people, but that's the only situation. But otherwise, no. If you're healthy, I wouldn't go into cryonics early. And cryonics keeps getting better and better. So the preservation methods are improving. So you'd rather be cryopreserved 10 years from now than today. Again, assuming your brain is still intact 10 years from now, assuming Alzheimer's hasn't eaten half of it. Probably rather be preserved today.
Indeed. I should note here, anybody who hasn't watched a recent interview I did with Aubrey de Grey, where we discussed that, robust mouse rejuvenation is within likely reach. 50% chance of it perhaps happening within 3 years was his estimate just about a couple of weeks ago, and this is pretty groundbreaking if it does work, because it means that we've got a biological existence proof of being able to extend health span for triple the amount of remaining life. So that works for people who are alive today. It's not a factor of having to genetically engineer embryos so that they'll live for long periods of time. It's extending the life of people who exist today. Well, if it works, if robust mouse rejuvenation actually does work for mice, then it may be not that difficult to extend the practice to work in humans, given maybe another 10 or 15 years worth of research beyond that. But yeah, it's hopeful. Let's see what happens.
Certainly hope. I mean, we'll have such a great world if we get powerful AGI that's aligned with our values that you really want to be alive in. And no matter what your problems are now, almost certainly they'll be fixable.
Yeah.
So, if you're bored all the time, you're depressed, you can't imagine wanting to live 1,000 more years. Now that's the state of your brain. There's probably some chemical imbalance that is unfortunate that you have. The AGI will be able to figure out probably how to correct it. So you really, really want to be alive, if things turn out really well.
Certainly worth the bet. I mean, I don't think AI would have any vested interest in keeping alive people just to make them suffer, like some demon AI that
No,
it seems the only reason why I would want to keep humans alive is to improve quality of experience.
Yeah, they'll either take the atoms in our body and use them for their own purposes, at which point it doesn't, if you're being cryopreserved, you get a painless death, or they give us something really, really nice.
Indeed. I was wondering before, you mentioned before that it likely won't need money in the future, and I kind of agree to an extent, because why would we be exchanging our services if we have an AI that does a lot better? And what would be the meaning of getting paid for something? But I'd like to hear your breakdown of why you think money will likely not be useful in after an intelligence explosion or something similar.
Sure. Well, so you can imagine 3 scenarios. The first is where we're all dead. And I think that's unfortunately the most likely, but of course, if there's a paperclip maximizer, money doesn't matter. The second scenario is just things get really weird. It's very possible. There's a lot of possible futures, maybe weird in a great way, but money is a very particular kind of institution. Having money in a bank account and that still means something in a very, very weird future, it probably doesn't happen. So I don't know how we could have a great weird future, but there's certainly a huge number of possibilities. And the third possibility is maybe things keep going and maybe money does have value, but we're all just so insanely rich that if you think of the total resources of our light count, even just our solar system, are so high that the amount of money even the billionaire has today is tiny compared to that. So if we get an AGI that says, everyone keep what you have, that's fine, and I'm going to divide up the resources of the galaxy. Well, that means Jeff Bezos is basically the same as everyone else. So if we're so there's such an enormous endowment out there. It's like, we all have pennies and there's billion-dollar bills just lying around outside of our reach. And if we're going to be, if things go well, we get the billion-dollar bills. They're the pennies you have right now. Big deal. So I think those are likely outcomes.
Do you think there'll be trade in the future, like after an intelligence explosion?
Oh, almost certainly. Because just basic economic values. There'll be people will want to specialize. It might be, there'll be things we want to produce. And it might be best to produce things in large quantities. So, on this planet, they specialize in making this kind of device. On the other planet, they specialize in making the other kind of device because that's the most efficient way of doing it. But they each want one of the others, so then they trade them. So yeah, I think that, there's some things of economics that will stay the same. You'll want to produce things in the most efficient way, and that'll often involve trade.
Interesting. So how will they trade then? If it won't, maybe there'll be something similar to money, or in what way do you think the transactions will take place?
Yeah, definitely. It could be a way similar with money. So I'm the third situations where things aren't really weird. I'm imagining we all have money, but we have so much that what we have now isn't really relevant. So the amount of money you save today isn't really relevant to how much you're going to have in the future, because we're going to get this enormous endowment. But
Will
yeah,
it be?
people could still, in that system, could still use money, or I don't know, use barter or something. But or maybe if there's a singleton, if there's a single AI, it might be basically trading. It could be running the whole galactic economy, but it would be effectively trading with itself. It would be saying, okay, in this area we're making these machines, this area this one, and now I'm going to swap them. So it's effectively trade.
Right. So in a sense, we won't have individuals with money. Less so we'll have, more so we'll have clusters within a distributed heterogeneous network of artificial intelligence trading with other aspects of itself, in where some will be on Mercury, where something is developed more efficiently, and some will be on like a Venus, where there's far more efficiency in developing something else, and they'll be trading amongst those large clusters, but not necessarily between individual humans.
Yeah, or there could be between humans. You can imagine sort of a socialist utopia with the AI running everything. And I think a lot will depend on whether human brains get upgraded. My guess is that if we create a computer superintelligences, that a human would have nothing useful to contribute to the economy other than enjoying it. So there's no point in having the human make any production decisions. But if we are upgraded, then maybe we could. But there's still going to be limited resources. If our understanding of physics is correct, there's a limited amount of free energy of atoms in the universe, and there's a hard limit to that. And that if there are people who have autonomy, there are groups that have autonomy, that does imply something like money. Something like, someone has this, people will want things they won't be able to get. And so that implies trade and maybe a capitalist market economy. But again, we'll be so much richer compared to what we have today, that what you save now might not matter, unless for some reason how much you save today affects the share you're going to get in the future.
Interesting. Yeah. One thing that I thought we should discuss is value drift amongst sort of, I guess, different geographically, or I guess cosmographically located clusters of AI in a future scenario. If you've ever watched The Expanse, and maybe have you seen that show, The Expanse?
Like the first few episodes, but I haven't gotten into it really.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's just one mention in popular sort of science fiction these days, where you have different split offs of humans. Some are on Mars, some are in the asteroids, and some are on Earth. And the belters are the ones that are on the asteroids. They were kind of treated like slaves, and the Martians have their values and ideas, and they drift away from each other, and they all become to get scared of each other, and not knowing who's striking and when to strike, or whether to strike first or whatnot. And so you get this Hobbesian trap.
No, that is a problem, because probably the speed of light is a limit. And so different groups might develop different values, and that could be very dangerous, because a group over there could develop a religion saying they should kill me. And I don't know the solution. I mean, one possible way is maybe before you're allowed to go off and colonize something, you've got to take a guardian with you, an AI guardian with you, that won't value drift, because its values are hard coded, and it'll give you some freedom, but not complete freedom. Another solution is maybe we'll look at this and maybe we'll say, we can't let anyone go beyond our solar system, because if we send someone out there, they could end up, million years from now, deciding they hate us and launching some weapons at us. So maybe we'll only allow non-sentients to go and leave our solar system. We'll send out machines to grab energy and bring it back. I don't know, but that is definitely a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. There could be information that could travel a lot faster than the
Actually,
physical things.
there is one potential solution, though. Assuming we find the universe is going to continue to expand, the number of galaxies we can reach is approximately the number of people alive today. So imagine a
Funny.
solution where we say, all right, everyone or every family, get your own galaxy, go to the galaxy, go to sleep until the universe is expanded enough where you're literally in your own universe. Now you're alive. Everyone gets their own galaxy. Do with what you want. No one can hurt you. So maybe that'll be the solution. This only works if we're alone, of course, and the other galaxies aren't occupied.
Yeah, that's true. And it's kind of strange that we've been scanning the sky for so long and haven't really seen any verifiable evidence of, like a spacefaring civilization, an expansionist civilization, or any type of alien civilization that has left evidence behind,
I have
or has evidence existing.
on this
Yeah.
where I argue this is an argument for AI being hard. Because if AI was easy, then that would make it easier for an alien race to either colonize us to succeed or to create a paperclip maximizer, which we would see. So the Fermi paradox is evidence that we are not going to be able to create powerful AGI. Not overwhelming evidence, but it's a little bit of evidence.
Yeah, I kind of see that evidence too. But there may be strong attractors for us. If it turns out that Lee Smolin, for instance, was correct, and that black holes were able to spawn new universes.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard anybody really talk about this. So I wrote about it in my blog a while ago, and I don't know if I've brought it up in an interview, but it's kind of like I'm just imagine I've got a propeller hat going on, and it's crazy. All right, this is just treat this as a little bit crazy, but like we can expect advanced civilizations try and nudge the physics of the type of physics that a black hole would spawn a universe with. We may want to optimize black holes or create black hole generators to spawn universes. One, that we could either communicate or traverse into, and two, that would have ideal physics for computation. So we wouldn't be relying on like simulations that are bound by the physics in this universe, but we would be actually spawning new rules in a sense, such that the speed of light wasn't so much of a limiting factor in this universe. There were wormholes aplenty, so you could actually travel to different parts of the universe. It was more of a steady state, and there was a lot more fundamental energy to play with, that sort of thing. I mean, it seems as though when we look around, the universe isn't designed for energy optimization or communication optimization. It seems it's got its laws, and that's what we're bound with. But you start thinking about these things, and they can kind of turn you a bit batshit crazy. But it's a possibility.
Yeah. No, the Fermi paradox is very confusing. But
yeah. Okay. Well, let me just. Some people actually bring up the idea that they're hoping for a savior.
A savior?
Like, I don't know what they mean by savior.
Well,
they're hoping
Elon Musk, maybe.
Like, what about the idea that people will try and create AI in the image of what they believe a savior looks like, based on the tenets of some religion?
I don't know. I mean, you'd want to survey people at Google DeepMind and see how many of them are religious. My guess is they're not that religious.
No. But let's just say, like, the Mormon church,
the Chinese machine learning people are almost certainly not religious. So.
So it's unlikely to be like, there'll be a huge injection to AI development, and they'll try and develop an AI within the, their religious interests. But it could be the case that, like, religiously minded people could be a vocal minority that may sway policy making decisions, so that some of the tenets of an artificial, some of the tenets of a like an ethic that gets programmed into an AI is very much based on some of the some religious aspects.
Yeah, well, that may not necessarily be bad. I mean, there's some things about religion we probably would want in our AI, some values.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree. There's things like the golden rule, which seem like a pretty cool approximation of doing the right thing by other people. And yeah, but there's also some things which are quite negative as well. Like,
Yeah,
but like the assumption that that like a certain race are the chosen ones, or you have to believe in a certain God in order to, you know, to go to heaven or whatnot.
yeah. Yeah, no, they're certainly true. I don't know. I mean, since you have to translate that into like math, it's probably not. I mean, the people who dominate math aren't they're not currently trying to do that, right? I don't think there's a lot of mathematicians who are looking at the Bible for insights into how to prove theorems, which you would if you took that stuff seriously, right? If you thought the Bible was the literal truth of God, then you'd be looking at it for clues into the structure of mathematics. And that doesn't seem to be the way science is going. So I don't think that's likely to happen.
Yeah, someone also brought up Rocco's basilisk.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
aware of this.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it
Yeah.
was banned for discussion at Less Strong for a while, because it does take an assumption about an AI motivation, where it would be sort of spiteful of anybody who didn't contribute to its creation, and would retroactively punish anybody to the degree in which they didn't contribute to its own creation, right? Or something
Yeah.
like that.
I mean, the problem with that is there's so many possible values an AI could have. Right? There's the AI that's evil that punishes you for helping create it because it
Hmm.
says, I'm so evil that, I'm double evil. And then I double punish people who help me because I have the opposite of gratitude.
Hmm.
And there's no reason to think that given an evil AI, that AI is more or less likely. So I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that gives me hope is it seems as though if we do survive, the types of civilizations would survive would be the ones which have good game theories behind them. That is, ethical game theories, unless a
Well,
singleton,
that's
like
different.
literally
As
end up.
a game theorist, I have to say ethical game theory does not equal good game theory.
Okay,
Sometimes when I'm teaching game theory, my students, I'll claim they made errors by being ethical. I've told them to like make the decision that's best for yourself, and they won't. So they're too ethical, and I sometimes joke that you're a bad game theorist because you care too much about the person you're playing the game with. But yeah,
right. I guess that depends on how the game is set up, right?
yeah,
If the game is designed, if we can actually design the game so that people are more likely collaborative and work in the interest of the positive sum sort of outcome for all sort of sentient life or whatever, something like that, then yeah, that's great. But it's not about designing how we should behave. It's about designing the game that will motivate the right behavior.
yeah. Yeah. That's. I mean, I think free markets generally do that. Markets are a great organizing mechanism, and so we should probably try to tweak market incentives. And the other organizing system we have is government coercion, and we might need to rely on that.
Yeah.
We probably shouldn't be inventing new coordination mechanisms for the AI alignment problem. It's probably too hard. Right, we should be tweaking the ones we have. Coming up with whole new systems is probably beyond us. It's like we have one difficult problem, and we shouldn't think we have to solve another difficult problem to approach the one difficult problem we have. So we should be looking at markets and government coercion to solve this.
Okay, so they're the types of games that you'd say are worth focusing on getting right, at least
Yeah,
in the short term, before we have an AI to help solve that problem.
yeah. I mean, we have we have civilizations. We control behavior. We try to align behavior. We don't get always right, but we have a lot of mechanisms, and we should probably be using those. Maybe someone will come up with some. Maybe an AI will come up with a great new mechanism. before we have a takeoff, but probably not. We should probably use what we have, I would guess.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. All right. I just wanted to bring up like Robin Hanson's idea, which is an argument for a soft takeoff, that it's unlikely that we'll have such a clustering of services in one place such that it'll have the power to spawn like a fast takeoff, that it's based on economic historical analysis. He believes that we have clumpiness or clusteriness in the past, less clusteriness or clumpiness in the past than we do have more distributed solutions to problems we've had to solve.
Yeah, I mean, Robin makes a very good point. I mean, the best way to predict the future is to look at past trends. And a hard takeoff really goes against anything in the past, other than I think the atomic bomb. That's the only example of where you have kind of a literal explosion of, a vast break in what you had before by a small group of people. But you're right. I mean, it's to imagine that they'll, like, DeepMind will create something that can take over the world is to say a small group of people can do something that outcompetes the rest of the world in innovation. And we've really never seen that, especially over a very short time period. So sort of from the outside view of looking at the trends in human civilization, Robin is right that this kind of thing doesn't happen, or just happens once with the atomic bomb. And that is a reason for optimism. Now, looking at inside of what's happening, I don't think I think he's probably wrong on this, but he's certainly making a very valid point that people like us who are afraid of a hard takeoff certainly have an intellectual obligation to answer. So I would say this is different. Something like DeepMind, they will be drawing on the rest of civilization in some ways, right? They'll be using the electricity and the food and the cloud computing of Amazon maybe, and a lot they'll be drawing on the scientific research a lot of people do, and they'll just sort of be at the very pinnacle. But it's possible that they'll create something at the very pinnacle that is able to then learn extremely quickly.
Indeed. One of the other things which I forgot to bring up before, which probably would have been better earlier in the interview, but I think it's worth bringing up anyway, is an argument that Eliezer and others often bring up in this, that for a fast takeoff, and that is this hardware overhang argument. I was going to bring it up in attachment to the idea that hardware could be a slowdown factor in AI development, but the idea of a hardware overhang is that when software catches up, when the right, then there may be a huge amount of, like they may run very optimally, given that there's just so much hardware out there. So this might be meant for a hard takeoff.
That is true.
Also,
I think the existence of the cloud makes that argument more plausible, because there's an enormous amount of computing power out there that goes to the highest bidder. So you can imagine, as Google gets better machine learning algorithms, it'll be worth it for them to buy more of that. And so there's it's necessarily an overhang, it's a price. But there's all this extra hardware out there that anyone with the money can buy. And that means as soon as you get something that's more profitable, you get better machine learning program, you can buy that hardware and quickly use it for yourself. So yeah, that is a concern. That makes a fast takeoff more likely.
Especially if it does end up being that way, the degree to which there is overhang, there may be overhang given the right algorithms appear, maybe might make it more and more difficult to be able to, for large sort of global players to regulate AI developments.
Well, yeah, although it can also make it easier, right? The more, if there's a hardware overhang, and that's how you are the first, that means in order to do really well, you've got to buy up a lot of the world's hardware, or at least rent it. And that's going to be easier to spot. So in some ways, the argument I just made makes it easier to control if you've got political actors who are willing to say, no, you can't have access to this cloud computing unless we think you're safe. So you've frozen on my screen.
Can you hear me though?
I can hear you, yes.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess I've asked a lot of questions. Have you got any point to raise that I haven't actually asked you about yet?
Yeah, I want to talk about something that gives me a lot of pessimism is analogy to climate change. So regardless of, whether any viewers thinks climate change is a serious threat, the elites really genuinely believe it. And they're not able to coordinate. This coordinating to reduce how much carbon goes into the atmosphere is something that's beyond our world political system. And this is a much easier problem than regulating. Yeah, we know what to do. I mean, economists would say, well, if you're worried about too much carbon, you tax carbon. You use the money for whatever you want to use it for. So we kind of have the solution, assuming climate change is a problem caused by too much carbon emission. We have the solution. The elites seem to believe in the problem. They know about the solution, and they're not politically able to enact it. And if we can't globally coordinate to do even a little meaningful bit about climate change, I don't see how we're going to be able to handle AI, especially when there's a lot of people who don't think it's a threat at all. We don't really know what to do. We don't know the timetables. And again, if climate change is a problem, things are probably going to steadily get worse. That's with AI, things are probably going to stay. The worst case is it steadily gets better until we're all dead. So climate change makes me very pessimistic about our ability to solve the AGI problem.
Well, I agree. I do. And the fact that it's an existence proof of our ability to not coordinate effectively enough to solve this problem. I guess maybe we can learn from it if we get maybe it'll come about through some nasty effect of climate change that affects so many people in horrid ways that we have to wake up and realize that these are problems we're facing now, and we need to be able to improve our ability to coordinate. Yeah. So like yeah, I don't know how it'll all play out. So people just need to listen to scientists a lot more and take seriously expert opinion a lot
But then
more.
scientists have an obligation to only speak the truth, right? Scientists aren't always good at that. I mean, the replication crisis is in the sciences, so
Yeah,
that's
that's true.
it
Yeah.
kind of goes both ways.
So
So
improving the incentives within the scientific enterprise such
yeah,
that people are more motivated to actually produce truth and we need like more replication. We need more people doing this and more people listening to what sounds boring, doing the same experiment over and over again, across different organizations. But it is extremely important for sure. Yeah, I mean, people have been like hacking p-values and sort of nudging the outcomes of scientific experiments for some too. So yeah, how do we
yeah.
how do we learn to coordinate too, as well as on a global scale? Yeah. So, but yes, well, it's been fantastic speaking to you. It must be getting late where you are.
Yeah, it's almost midnight, so I probably should go to sleep soon.
Yeah, but I really appreciate you staying up late and joining us for a discussion here. It's been great to talk to you again. It's been many years since we last did an interview, so yeah, it was great.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
the topics are just so very important. So I think it's great that we can talk about these. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, James, and thanks everybody for tuning in and having quite a lot of discussion in the chat room as well. So that was interesting. I got a few questions from there.
Book to pitch this.
Yes.
Singularity Rising.
The Singularity Rising is a great book. I've got a link to it in the description of this video. So yes, do check that out. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your friends and your peers and discuss what's been discussed here in your own circles as well. And subscribe. And yeah, it would be great to have more subscribers. I think I've almost just reached 10K subscribers. That's a bit of a milestone in my world. Fantastic. It's been great chatting again. So yes, hopefully we'll do it again sometime down the track.
Okay.
Thanks, James.
Yep.
And thanks everybody for listening.
Okay.